Today I'd like to share with you guys the new printer's cabinet I made. The dimension is optimized for a common laser printer. The countertop of this cabinet is birch, the drawer front are black walnut, and the main structure is white oak. As you can see, these three materials go really well together. The material used in this project are leftovers I had from other projects. This is a 3/4 inch thick white oak plywood. First, I needed to break down this 8-foot long board, so I adjusted the fence to the size that is slightly bigger than my final dimension. I also put down my stock guide to help me process the large sheet. I prefer to not wear gloves when using a table saw. If a single thread on the glove gets caught by the table saw blade, it could take your whole hand into the blade. Very scary to even think about it. Here's a closer look of the rough cut I just made. Notice the edges are very rough. Oak is a pretty brittle material. When cross-cutting oak, the side where saw blade comes out of the material tends to have tear-outs. To avoid tear-outs, I used the 3-pass method. First, lower the blade until just a little bit of it comes out of the surface, and then make the first pass, cutting a shallow groove on the oak board. For the second pass, without changing my fence setting, flip the oak board and make another shallow groove. This is what the shallow groove looks like on the oak board. Notice there is no tear out. For the final pass, again, do not change the fence setting. Raise your blade and cut through the board. I then did edge banding using pre-glued white oak edge banding. As mentioned, oak is a pretty brittle material. Therefore, we also needed to pay attention to the direction of the grain pattern when trimming the oak edge banding. As you can see here, the grain is going from upper right to lower left. So in this case, the trimmer should cut from right to left. In other words, cutting along the grain instead of cutting against the grain. Oak fiber is thin and tend to poke into the skin. So after I trimmed the edge banding, I also sanded the edge a little bit to make it smooth. Then I sanded the surface of the board. For convenience, I used pocket holes to connect the boards. After using the pocket hole jig for some time, I get pretty efficient at making pocket holes. I also used some scrap walnut for the 4 feet of the cabinet. The cabinet top is somewhat of a floating design. Therefore, I made thin wood strips using some scrap black walnut. Honestly, bandsaw is the best tool to make this kind of cuts, but unfortunately I don't have a bandsaw, and thus I have to witness a bunch of this beautiful material turn into dust due to the curve of the saw blade. I also added more pieces of wood strips in the middle to support the cabinet top. Then I drilled pilot holes for the screws. This piece of birch butcher block is also a leftover piece from my other projects. For the top piece and the frame, I applied polyurethane to protect them. This is water-based polyurethane. I like this product a lot. It's easy to apply and easy to clean. Here I'm making the drawers. Having a stop block for the miter saw is very convenient. The stop block helps making consistent cuts at the same length. Then I made grooves for the drawer side panels. A single pass is not enough, therefore I adjusted my fence and did another pass to widen the groove. When assembling drawers, these right angle blocks are very helpful. Here, I screwed down these right angle blocks to my workbench so that I can quickly assemble the drawers. Here I started making the drawer front. The drawer front is made out of solid black walnut. I set a stop block on my router table fence. This stop block allows me to make sure the length of my cuts are consistent. Then I found a piece of scrap and used it as a test piece to make sure the stop block indeed gives me the length of the handle I wanted. When a router is installed on the router table, the router bit turns counterclockwise. Therefore, the material to the right of the router bit tends to have a lot of tear out. To reduce tear out, I first put my material at my stop block, then slowly feed the material into the router bit. Doing it this way reduces tear out, but will not eliminate it. The router bit I'm using is less than 3/4 inches tall. Therefore, I cannot process 3/4 inch thick material in one pass. So I adjusted the router bit to be a little more than half of 3/4 inches and process half of the thickness first. And that is why you cannot really see the router bit right now, because the router bit is only half the height of this material. After processing half of the thickness, I adjusted the router bit to be a little taller than my material to finish making the handle notches. I used natural wood stain on these walnut drawer fronts. I think it brings out the beauty of the grains nicely. Last, I applied 2 layers of polyurethane for protection. Before installing the drawer fronts, I designed each drawer front to have an 1/8 inch gap between each other. I made some 1/8 inch shims and placed them at the bottom of the frame. Then put the bottom drawer front on top of the 1/8 inch shim. The side gap of the drawer front is also 1/8 inch. This way I can use a clamp to secure the drawer front, drill 2 pilot holes from inside of the drawer, and secure the drawer front with screws. The same concept applies to the rest of the drawer fronts. They are all 1/8 inch apart from the bottom drawer. So installation process are the same. Using a 1/8 inch shim, clamp the drawer front, secure using screws. And here we have the final product.